in climate?
Yeah, so you said the last time we had a call together with Jackie, you said good news team, and it stuck in my brain. And when I was doing, just little notes and writing, I kept writing good news army. And so it kind of stuck, and I, pitched it to Ines, and we were like, it sticks. So we can use this for a hashtag as well. It can be something that people kind of get in on, and like, so we think that's
and the followers could be like climate soldiers for us,
Yeah, the little climate soldiers. That's such a cute like addition. I definitely think it's a good name.
I love it. It's funny. There's Christiana Figueres, the Outrage and Optimism podcast. So she always gets angry and says, "Don't call this a war. Don't call us an army, because that means fighting." But I've always thought it was cool.
I mean,
yeah,
somebody has to fight for it.
Yeah, we are fighting.
Yeah,
kind of.
And that's, I mean,
progress.
Yeah.
And maybe it's been wrong to pretend that we don't have to be aggressive and fight. The good news army.
Yeah, the good news army.
Okay,
so trial run. Okay. Hello.
Yeah. This is like we know to edit and cut. How about that?
Yeah, this is where trial run.
Okay.
Okay, so hello, and welcome back to the Good News Army, the podcast where optimism isn't just a mood, it's a movement. I'm Ines, and I will be one of your hosts today. And as always, I'm joined by the ever insightful Emma.
It was perfect. So clear. That as well, the catchphrase that you came up with, we need to keep that absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just a mood, it's a movement. That one, I wrote that down last week. I remember that was super good. Okay.
And maybe I can just add one little bit to the end. And we want to tell you how far this movement has come already, how much progress we're making. We want to tell you the good news. Something like that. Like the purpose of this is to spread and share the good news, so you don't think it's all doom, but just to give the purpose.
Yeah, I had something like, we're here to bring you stories that spark hope and conversations that inspire action.
And how much progress we're already
making.
That's something that I think the big need
for. Yeah, we need to sell it, like we're giving you secret insights on what's actually happening. Yeah. Make them feel like special, in on the special info.
Yeah. How could we say it? Do you want to say it, Emma? Like, we're here to bring you, like...
We're here to share
We're here to share the progress and
the solutions, the progress, and how much closer we are to
reaching,
how much closer we are, or how much farther along we are, or how much better things are than the news and social media might have you think.
Yeah.
We're here to bring you the dominant narrative. This is the good news army.
Yeah. Okay, so when I say that I'm joined by Emma, you can say all that. Like, we're here to bring you
give you good news and the latest updates on our progress towards...
We're here to share with you how much progress we're making, how many solutions are out there, and how much brighter the future is going to be than the doom and gloom news might have you think, or social might have you think.
Towards a brighter and greener future.
Yeah. It's much closer than you think.
A closer than you think, brighter and greener future.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And maybe the first episode with these diagrams, you can say, so what we want to start with today is some of the basics of where the problems really are, not as everybody thinks, and all the solutions that are out there, and some of the, the myths. I'll toss the myths in.
Yeah, we should definitely start with the subjects that are most misconceptions, like that's definitely what we should aim to start with, to hook people in, because that's the one that will probably attract the most attention.
And maybe you both start with, you make an introduction of me just briefly, and I'll do super, super fast and simple. And you can say, so what we want to do today is we want to ask you some questions about what our generation thinks, where all the problems are, and what all, the lack of progress and some of the things that are generally believed, and, and what we might be getting wrong, or what might be brighter than we think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Wait, what? We want you to share with us, like, what's happening and
I guess some of the facts, just some of the basic breakdowns of of where emissions are really coming from, what the real problems are.
Yeah, so maybe when we say like something like let's dive in, we can follow that up by saying, so first of all, we want to lay down like some ground basic stuff that Jenny's going to explain to us.
Yeah.
Like what's happening, where the problem are,
and what your generation thinks. Like, so we all believe that the real problems are these things, and we believe the solutions are these things, and you can make it up as you go. You can just
like plastic straws, littering. Yeah, actually it's not really that.
So and that'll be fun to do all of those actually, and we'll have to cut out stuff that I go too long on. Okay.
It should definitely be a conversation. Like, it'll be comfortable, like, with like we're asking questions from the perspective of our generation that don't know, we don't have all the information, so it'll be personal, and like I think we'll be comfortable, and
so let's roll it again.
Ready?
Okay, so hello, and welcome back to the Good News Army, the podcast where optimism isn't just a mood, it's a movement. I'm Ines, and I'll be one of your hosts today. And as always, I'm joined by the ever insightful Emma.
Thank you very much, Ines. Yes, we're here to give you the latest good news and progresses on climate solutions, leading us all to a closer than you think, brighter and greener future.
Today, we're thrilled to have a special guest marching with us, Jennie-Marie, CEO and founder of Planetary Intelligence. Hi, Jenny.
Hi there. Call me Jen. Jennie-Marie is really long. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to talk about the progress. And I feel so sad sometimes with your generation. My kids are, in your generation, and they think that the future is so gloomy, and they think that all is lost and we're not making progress and the solutions aren't out there and it's all doomed. It's not. We're making so much progress. And I always say, it's not a myth where all the problems are. We know where all the problems are. Industry knows where all the problems are. Governments know where all the problems are. And we also know what all the solutions are. And we have all the solutions necessary to address climate change, to reduce emissions, to restore nature, and to start bringing down temperatures. So yes, we are late in the game, and we are not making as fast progress as we should be doing, but we are making a lot of progress. So I'm very, very excited to be with you guys today.
We're very excited to have you here. So for our generation, the problem is mostly like plastic, fast fashion, stuff like that. And we think that those are the main problems, but I don't really know if that's true. Maybe we could lay down some basic like understanding of what actually are the problems and what are the solutions.
Sure. And Emma, when you guys say the big problems are fast fashion and plastics, do you want to describe a little bit more in detail what do you mean specifically with the big problems of plastics and fast fashion?
Well, we're commonly led through social media, in our own education and everything, we're led to believe that, as much as it is an issue, littering, plastics, overuse, overconsumption, especially of fast fashion, buying clothes from specific companies, we're told that it's not helpful for the environment, that it has negative effects, but really we're not completely educated on how it all works and what we could actually do to, reduce the amount of waste that we're producing.
So there's many subjects within there, and I'll try and unpack them briefly, just to separate them. So let's start with fast fashion, right? Because fast fashion, we all, love our Zaras, and we love our Shanes, and we love we love clothes, and we love it, right? And we wish that we didn't have to love it, and we think that we want to, go in Vinted and get things secondhand, which is wonderful, right? Those are very good things to do. To start with, why fast fashion is and it is a huge problem. There is no question, right? So the amount of water that is used in the treatment of, creating the fabrics, and the pollutants from dyes that go into the oceans and the water bodies, and the amount of energy used to produce, and the crops to produce. So all those things are a huge problem. And many of the fabrics that we know and love, the synthetics, those are actually fossil fuel derivatives, right? They're made from fossil fuels. So those are all bad problems. But again, this is how, we've been living since the Industrial Revolution. We've been producing using fossil fuels. So in this, the Good News Army, we're not going to be shaming anyone, because we all love the life that energy has given us. We all love the modern life, and we don't really want to not have the modern life. So the solutions all lie in changing the way we produce things, the way we make things, the way we consume things, and very importantly, the way we dispose of things, which is one of the bigger ones. So the good news is, in fast fashion, the big brands like a Zara or a Mango or an H&M, they all really understand the problem that their products are producing. They really understand it. And so the good news is they are some of the most aggressive and most progressive in investing in the solutions. So we'll have to, in the show notes, we'll have to come up with the specific stats on this, but I think it's Zara who has pre-purchased a massive amount of fabrics that are going to be produced using CO2 waste gas, right? So if you think about the emissions that come from like a power plant, or the emissions that come from making steel or making cement, those emissions can be captured and then used to make new products, like fabrics, like makeup, like cosmetics, like I think even like so many things can be produced with waste gases, with general waste. So that's one thing that the big guys are really investing in, is alternative material production. They're also heavily investing in understanding end of life of product. So again, we have to find the stats on this, but like a Zara and an H&M and all these big guys, they have also invested in the end of life of their products. So all used fabrics from their lines, they're recycling them to produce new fabric. So they haven't shifted everything, because of course they've been around for decades, right? I think I was a teenager when H&M came out, and we loved it. But so it takes a long time to shift the way you produce, where you produce, how you produce, who produces, how you ship. It takes a long time. That's why the whole get to net zero emissions, which we can cover in a, later, is 2050, because it takes decades to change the machines, change the business. It's really hard. So the fact that already, 25 years from the target date, these big fashion companies who've really seen that they're a big issue, that they've invested in taking care and taking responsibility for the end of life of their fabrics and how they get their fabrics. And the solutions are all out there, but they're not all yet in use, but they certainly know them. So for you guys, major thing to think about is, when you're fed up with some of your clothes, figure out, now where does this go? And you can probably just contact them on I don't know, TikTok or socials, and say, okay, where do I put my old crap? What do I do now? And they are taking responsibility for that, for that end of use of product. So fast fashion, big problems, yes, but also huge solutions, and the big players are taking responsibility. So they're not all bad actors. In fact, because they're so big, because you guys are so loud in complaining, in calling out, they're really taking responsibility. So there's fashion. Next,
Yeah.
plastics, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to, do you have any comments on that? Any thoughts on that? Like what does your generation, what do you think of that? Do you hear about that? Does anyone talk about that?
I
Not
mean,
really, no. They don't
no,
really talk about it. But I think it's logical that the big like corporates have to take action because, well, we hold them accountable for it. We like there's a lot of boycotts going on, like for tons of different stuff, tons of different reasons. So they have to take accountability or they're not going to sell anything anymore. So if they want to keep on making money, they need to change.
Yeah. Emma, what do you think?
I mean, the only thing is that just how crazy it is that I've, apart from the first conversation I had with you a couple of weeks ago, I had no idea that any of this kind of progress was in place, that any of these companies were actually putting in the actions that it needs to, sustain the amount of waste that they're putting out, and also, like you said, taking responsibility for what happens after the clothes are used and worn and where do they go afterwards. I mean, we have no idea that this going on behind closed doors.
Well, so it's not even behind closed doors because they're all forced to, or they do it voluntarily. They do their impact reporting, their corporate sustainability report, their emissions report. So if you go on their websites and you look for like sustainability report, you can read and you're like, are you kidding? They're doing so much. But nobody reads those from your generation, right?
Yeah, we
So
don't. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
even think to look for that.
Yeah, but I think it's weird they don't advertise it more then because
Yeah.
that would push people
well,
to not buy more because
maybe
that's
they
kind of
do, but maybe they don't know where to reach you, right? Maybe they don't know what channels to reach you through. Maybe they just don't get it. Because remember, you know, communications is shifting so much, and you're getting your news and you're getting your, communications, your access from different sources than us old fogies are used to using, So I see on LinkedIn tons and tons and tons, like L'Oreal, for example, tons and tons of stuff that they want to do, water neutrality, because water is also a huge issue. It's not just emissions. It's resources, right? So taking responsibility for the amount of water that's used in production and impact on local biodiversity of where they take their original resources. So these reports are kind of interesting. Maybe in another session, we should actually look at some of these guys' reports, and you'll be shocked to see how advanced a lot of these companies are.
Yeah.
I was shocked looking at I think it was Microsoft or Google's like 2 years ago when they came out with ChatGPT, and oh my goodness, they blew their emissions targets out of the water by like 30%. And so I went and looked at their report, and they're doing so much. And the fact that they have to report publicly, and they're publicly traded companies, means that everyone's looking, as in businesses are looking, investors are looking, business partners are looking. And so they have to disclose, they want to disclose all the things that they're investing in to improve and reduce their impact on nature, on waste production, on energy consumption. So it's the pressure from consumers and pressure from markets that are making them move as quickly as they are. So yeah, that might be fun actually to sort of debunk some of the myths of the bad actors versus how very much the big actors are doing, because they know that they have the money and they have the huge global markets, that if it's not them, who will it be? Like back to that example of when Microsoft emissions, blew up, they realized that as AI accelerates and the innovation accelerates and the consumption accelerates and energy consumption associated with AIs accelerates, they realize we're going to have to double down on something else that really matters. And they double down on, as they, manufacture, as they build new data centers, those are all cement, right? And so they decided that they would heavily invest in low emission cement production, which is incredibly helpful for that industry because we use cement everywhere. And we actually know how to do low to no emission cement, but it's early in the market. So to have big buyers reorder really helps that industry. You guys also asked about plastics, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge subject. We should almost do like an episode all on plastics. But some of the myths, that the oceans are filled with plastics and you should not use your plastic straws, and that plastics are the major problem. So ocean plastics first. Yes, oceans are full of microplastics, but it's not the biggest ocean problem. The biggest ocean problem, there's many. You can never say what's the biggest. There is no biggest. Many. It's a myriad of big bad problems and interdependencies, right? So one of the major ocean problems is from agriculture, because we use so much pesticide and fertilizers run off into the rivers and then into the oceans. And that causes enormous acidification of the oceans. So that's a big, huge problem. And the oceans are warming because the temperatures are warming and the ice sheets are, anyway, so oceans have many problems, but the plastics problem is, first and foremost, the majority of the plastics that go into, that are in the ocean are from industrial fishing. And they leave all their fishing crap behind. That's huge sources, right? And plastic waste that goes in the oceans, that's not primarily Western nations, wealthy nations, because wealthy nations, the US, Canada, I'm from Canada originally, Europe, we have much better waste systems, right? So when you put your garbage out every week, the truck comes and takes it takes the recycling and it takes the regular garbage, and there are waste systems that then separate them and then do much more, productive and responsible things with them. Whereas in developing nations, like Southeast Asia and South America, they don't have the same waste systems. So they end up dumping much of their waste in the rivers, which then goes to the oceans. I think it's something like 150 rivers are the primary source of waste and plastics going into the ocean, and most of them are in Asia and South America. Not because they want to pollute, but because they don't have the infrastructure and the waste systems.
Yeah.
So it's not your plastic straws that are causing the big problems.
Yeah, but I remember being traumatized when I was little by everyone saying talking about the plastic island, the garbage island.
Yeah.
That was a big thing at some point, and they were just guilt tripping us, being like, "This is your plastic straws. Those are your
not yours, not yours."
Yeah.
No, yours. I mean, it's not like we in Europe are outstanding with waste. We're really quite shitty, actually. And I get annoyed with recycling bins because everyone's like, you must recycle. I think it's something like 12% of plastics are recycled. The rest are incinerated. So that drives me nuts, because we can actually do huge amount of things with plastics and reuse. And you can even create, I think you can create like fuel out of plastics. You can create bricks to build houses out of plastic. So there's so many things that we can be doing. And then there's also a really positive side of plastics. We don't want to end plastics. We're going to get down the path of so many different subjects here, but we waste 30% of all food that we grow on the planet. 30%. That's a lot, right? I don't know, it was Zoom that did a funny thing.
Yeah.
Most of the waste in developed nations like Europe and North America, it's us. It's us assholes who don't finish our plate and toss it in the garbage, or restaurants that throw out their waste, food that doesn't get eaten, or the fridge where we don't finish our food. We waste 30% because it doesn't get eaten, right? So composting really, really matters. Almost more than recycling. Composting matters so much because the emissions from methane that comes from food waste is very, very bad too. We'll go through all those things. But yeah, recycling is not the dream it's crocked up to be. It should be. It should be reused. But plastics are incredibly important because you can package food in them. You can save food in them. You can transport food in them. If we didn't have plastics, then we would waste way more. And we need plastics. Like if you look at the table around you, how many things are made of plastic, right? So plastics are really important, but we can also produce plastic-like material with many, many other things, like mycelium, mushrooms. We can make plastic-like material. We can make like disposable plastic. That's, yeah, single-use plastic that we need to, we need to phase out. And the solutions for that are with mushrooms, with mycelium, and I think even CO2 waste gas we can make plastics with, and seaweed. Lots and lots of solutions using seaweed to create single-use plastic.
The seaweed I've heard about, but could you explain how they use mycelium? I have never ever heard about that.
So put this on the list for, future episodes where we go through like all the things that you can make out of mycelium. But mycelium, mushrooms, fungus, you can create so many things out of. So many things. And it's also it's the regenerative system of nature. When things die in nature, mycelium takes them, decomposes them, and creates, soil out of them. So mycelium is, you might even say if there's one solution, it's mycelium, because it's the intelligence network of our world. And wonderful Netflix documentary called Mycelium Running. We'll put in the show notes, but it's magical, everything that can be made with mushrooms. But and seaweed. You can produce all these different products with mushrooms and with seaweed, mycelium. So we should make a list of all these things and go deeper into it. But yeah, there's so many solutions.
Yeah.
But plastics are very important in many cases and can be made from other substances or can be made from existing plastics reuse. So it's not as much about recycling, it's about reuse, repurposing, use things to the very end. But durable, live forever plastics, those are important. We need those. So it'll take time to be able to work out the wasteful activities that we have and replace with the durable. This is why in French it's développement durable, because it has to be durable. And so it's true, single-use plastics are not going to be a part of our future. And plastics are fossil fuel based. So that's another reason why. But it's not actually necessary to have zero fossil fuel products in our life, but we can get rid of 90% or so with alternatives, with renewable energies, with efficiencies, etc. But there still is a role for fossil fuels in our future, but not for the emissions that they produce when they're being extracted and the destructive nature. So I have been doing a monologue.
But it's very insightful. It's really interesting to see everything that we think we know, it's not actually that accurate. Like we get so much more precision from you.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
There's so many things that I'm just like.
But and here's the other myth. There's no such thing as a climate expert on all the things. It's like a forever learning process. I've been studying this like crazy for 5-6 years, and I'm learning every day. There's those, I mean, you can't know it all. It's just not possible. We said that we would go through some of the, sorry, that's our climate solution recommender platform. We'll talk about that another time, but we were talking about different sources, and that people go bonkers over, bad plastics, bad, but actually one of the worst that if you had two sectors to be drilled into and really pay attention, number one is how we use our land, how we make food, how we grow, how we treat soil, how we treat nature. That's one of the biggest challenges, and we're not very good, and we have so many areas to improve. And there's a commitment that was made by the United Nations process, the COP. And so there are actually, I think, are there 3 or there 4 COPs? There's a COP on biodiversity, on nature, and then there's a COP on climate, and then I think there is a is there a COP? Anyway, we'll look this up, but there's multiple COPs, and the biodiversity one, they made a commitment to protect 30% of the world's nature by 2030. So that means coastal zones, that means forests, that means, just land and nature. And we're not on track, but we're moving aggressively towards that. So that's another thing that I don't love, is the poo-poo on, on the global climate meetings. They're really, really important, really important. And, flying to those, we want people who are going to bring down the rules and push. We want them to fly there, because the airline industry, there's another myth. Everybody thinks that air travel is so bad. No, it's like 2-3% of emissions. No, it's not a good thing, but the airline industry, they're already working very hard towards sustainable aviation fuel, and that industry really knows what the problems that they need to address, so they're aggressively moving that way. So I don't love the criticisms of the Al Gore's, for example, who's done so much to advance the climate agenda. How dare he fly? Well, yes, we need him to go there. It's not actually helpful to not let these people push the world forward. Anyway, so deforestation, this is the issue with meat, right? Where everybody's like, you must be vegan, you must not eat meat. The problem with meat is that I think something like 70% of all agricultural land in the world, which we should find the stat, but this is why they deforest, is to make space for growing food for cows. And if we reduced our meat intake, even just like by, I don't know, 50%, 70%, 80%, like make meat a treat, that would do so much for climate. Because the fact that we're using 70% of all land to grow food for cows is ludicrous. So the business of, we're not going to run out of food. We have more than enough food for everybody. We just have to stop eating so much meat, because it's where we're using most of the land. So that's totally ridiculous. And that's what deforestation is. It's about making space to grow more, food for cows. It's not, obviously it's not that simple, but that's why, right? And the other thing, methane from animals. So, there's CO2, and that's, what we measure emissions in, but we measure it in CO2 equivalent. And methane is actually much worse than CO2, because it heats the planet something like 70 times more than CO2. It stays in the atmosphere for less time, like 10 years or 20 years, but CO2 will stay in for like 1,000 years, but it heats so much faster. And so cows, it's not their farts, it's their burps. So cows' burps, and think about all the land we're using for cows, because we all love to eat our meat. Their burps, I think, it's like 5% of emissions. which is huge, right? Way more than flying. And in fact, actually about the same as cars. Cars globally are like 5% of emissions. So, and there's one of the seaweed solutions. If you feed cows this interesting red seaweed like supplement in their food, you just dump it in their food, it reduces their emissions by like 90%, which is wild, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And those are the solutions that people don't know about. They're solutions for everything. And a lot of them are nature-based, because nature is the only efficient system on the planet. And nitrous oxide, there's a problem with the oceans and the runoff. Nitrous oxide is another one of the gases and is what emits from using fertilizer, again, for agriculture. And methane from rice, that's another area that there's loads of solutions, but growing rice is also a huge challenge. And think of how much of the world rice is their primary source of nutrition. But there's so many solutions, right? And waste and diets are the big ones, right? Plant-rich diets, it's the cow thing, because then we need less land used for growing food for cows and for cows. And also, the less land we use for agriculture, the more we can just let go wild. And land, when it's healthy, so between oceans and land, 40% of emissions can be captured by nature if it's healthy. Do we want to keep going? Because I can just go and go and go.
You can go and go and go. Everything you say is so insightful. So talk about the solutions maybe now.
Yeah.
So, okay, so addressing the plant-rich diets, go for plant as much as you can. And it's super yummy. You don't have to be vegan. I could not be vegan. I need to have my Parmesan. And I must have my feta, and I do love a good steak sometimes, but it's a treat. It's not you don't need everyday meat every day. It's a treat, right? So plant-rich diets is a big, big help because it reduces the amount of land that's used too, right? And avoid like McDonald's, Burger King, until they have like plant-based burgers. They're the big sinners. It's industrial scale, right? It's not your wonderful French butcher in your little tiny town. They know where the meat comes from. They've chosen the cow. That's different from industrial scale. And reducing food waste, we here in Europe can't do anything about the food waste that's happening from farm to market. So we in the global north, they say in climate, some people think that sounds bad, but global north is northern hemisphere is the rich developed nations, Europe, North America. And our food waste comes from the table, the restaurant, the fridge. So waste less. And France is really good at this. France, if you didn't eat it tonight, you're going to eat it tomorrow in your soup. France is really good about this. In fact, France, I would almost say, are one of the best of the best of the best in rich nations in focusing on climate, on solutions, on protecting nature. So we'll have to do a whole French episode one day to say how good France is compared to so many. But reducing food waste in the global north means at the table, at the restaurant. So whatever you don't eat, in the compost. Whatever you don't eat, try and reuse it. Give to dog, give to chickens. Chickens, they eat everything. Chickens go, reducing food waste, because food waste, A, means we've used less land for agriculture, and B, food goes into a dump, a pile. Like if you see in the vineyards, they leave the grapes that they haven't, the waste, they leave it on the side, that emits methane. So less food waste means less, I'm looking for the word, the dump, the déchetterie, anyway.
Oh, I don't know the word in English.
I don't either. I think it's dumped actually, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, and the reason that Global South wastes so much food is the opposite, is because they don't have the transport systems to get it from the field to the market, or they don't have the cooling systems to preserve it to get it to the retail, to the consumer. So that's much more stressful and needs solutions. So it needs cooling solutions. Look, here we go, the solution. So nutrient management, this is about soil. We have to shift agricultural processes, right? Use less pesticides, use less fertilizers, and stop the industrial scale that we do. This is a whole other session that we can do, but regenerative agriculture and understanding health of soil matters so much. And we've done so much industrial agriculture that the soil health has been deeply depleted. I think something like 30% of the world's land is desertified, as in it has no more nutrient, no more life. But that can be restored. There's crazy solutions on how to restore, and they're funny solutions. They're like chickens and cows and manure and grazing, and that restores land to health. There's some wonderful stories of how land has been restored. And peatland rewetting, protection of wildlife, mangroves are one of the most important protections against extreme weather. So yeah, protecting coastal wetlands, that's part of this, protecting 30% of nature by 2030. And Indigenous peoples' forest tenure. Here's another huge one. So 4% of the world's population are the stewards of 80% of its biodiversity, which means the Indigenous people. And that's like the Sami in Norway, or, you know, the native population in Canada or the US, like people who were always the owners, the stewards, they were on the land, they know how to manage the land. You know, they know how to do periodic fires in forests so that they keep the you know, the brush down. And, you know, the Aboriginals in Australia, like the native populations know how to manage nature. So tenure means give them their land, you know, give them the rights to their land, because they know how to manage it way better than we silly modern goofballs. No. Yeah, this is what this is all about. It's protecting nature, and it's doing regenerative agriculture, which means you don't kill the soil. You know, you let it rest. You do intercropping. You know, you don't do the same crop on the same field every single year. You intercrop, you let it rest. Yeah. Protecting ecosystems. Do you want to go to next or cut off? Like, this feels like it's going to be long.
I mean,
in my monologue.
you've covered so much. We've got so much content, so much information in what you've given us. Like, it's
Yeah, we do. I just wanted to ask a question. You talked about France being like a good actor in that. Do you know about the farm to fork strategy, like in Europe, like part of the European Green Deal? I don't really know like what the legislations are, but I know it's for a more like sustainable food system, less waste.
Put that in the list of subjects, because I think we should do, and we'll check the transcript of this. Let's just say this one we cut, because we can just keep going and going and going, and we will. This was kind of lovely, except it was also a little bit goofy and all over the place. I don't know if you're going to want to cut pieces, or if you want to let the whole thing go, or if you want to send it out to your, anyway, you'll have a think of how you want to do this, but we can go back and more seriously look at these things. And also you might want to, in some of this talking, put little images of these.
Yeah. Definitely like notes when we say we'll look at it later or something like that. Just notes explaining what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I kept, you know, saying we'll put it in the show notes, because there's so many things that we can go back and put links in. And Is this something that you can, I'll stop the recording. Stop recording.
Hang on, I'll be right back. I just have to get my charger for my phone.
Well, I was gonna say, let's